Hello and welcome to the CastNet podcast. My name is Mahendra Gasai.
My name's Kevin Rain.
And I'm Ryan Sahadeo.
And welcome to our second episode. Today we're going to be talking about happiness and kind of like the journey to happiness. But before we get into that, let's talk about what we got into this week. Kevin, anything interesting happened this week?
For me, it's just been an onslaught of updates from Spider-Man. Just everybody wanting to see that.
Yeah.
And
it's a pretty good movie.
That was pretty good. You know, I was reflecting because I'm always either in the position where everyone's seen the movie and I haven't, or I'm the only one who's seen the movie and no one else has. So It's been the same with both of these, like all the big releases so far this year, really. So.
Yeah, you know, I used to be one of those that would go and make sure I see it on opening weekend, because otherwise you would get spoilers from everybody you knew, right? Everybody at work or everybody at the college or something, back in the day. But nowadays, I consider myself a cinephile, but I don't go opening weekend as much anymore. But all three of us went to see Spider-Man opening weekend, which is kind of like a treat because I usually don't. What about you, Ryan? Getting into anything this week?
No, but dodging those Spidey theories left and right has been interesting because, man, anyone who's seen that movie, definitely has a lot to say about it. And it's apparently been the highest grossing or one of the highest grossing Marvel movies to date. So, I mean, it even shattered Endgame's record, which is saying something.
Yeah, people I think were expecting something like this, right? They've been waiting for something like this for a while. They had some kind of big flops. DC just had a big flop with Supergirl 2 as well. Not Supergirl 2, but also. And, that's, so superhero movies in general, they were kind of wondering if, they're still making if they're getting the pull they once did, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, for me, I had an uneventful week. But there was one day I went to the doctor's office, took my mom to her appointment, and at this kidney doctor, and it was kind of funny because they were playing like spa music, and every time I go there, they're playing this spa music, and I kid you not, I think if 10 more minutes of hearing that spa music, they would have been just be asking me, "Sir, why are you undressing? Sir, why are you laying down on our table?" Hey, I mean, at some point I'd be like, "Hey, what's going on in this place?" But it's really interesting. I guess it's meant to relax you, but it was quite jarring, to say the least.
I think that's a fine line between relaxation and putting you to sleep.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I think it's meant to. I guess I don't know. In so many levels, it was really interesting to see how if the crowd would go along with it, but
sure.
They kind of weren't. They were just on their phones and just kind of going away. But I was the only one who noticed. But anyway, we're going to get into our main topic today. And our main topic is happiness. Now, we'll kind of go through different kinds of phases of happiness. We'll kind of be talking about how we determine maybe what happiness is, how we others perceive happiness is. We'll talk about society, how society really puts an emphasis on happiness, and is it really happiness, right? Because the government has an idea of what happiness is, and we all know it as the American dream, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we, is that something that is really perceived as true happiness, right? Or maybe even perhaps not happiness, but maybe just goal setting.
Sure.
Do people really inflate that goal setting with happiness? So we'll kind of go through a lot of those topics today to examine happiness. I think we're going to call it, I think a good show title today will be maybe Chasing Happiness.
Yeah.
You like it?
That.
Do you
sure.
like this? Yeah.
Sure.
I think good show title. I think we found that is Chasing Happiness. So let's start with goals and happiness and distinguishing whether or not is goals leading you to happiness or are they actually happiness, and are the goals you're chasing actually your goals, right? So Kev, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think if you ask people, are you happy, they go through a checklist of their goals, and I think we organize principles of just how our life should be, ideals, And some of that is influenced by our surroundings, and others are like individual pursuits, whether that's, it's in your career, you want to, aspire to be the top of your field, or, maybe it's a family oriented lifestyle. You want to kind of get married and have children. It looks different for different people, but I wanted to kind of expand upon what you just mentioned there, like how much of that is self-imposed, like you set it for yourself, or is influenced by society, because there is that American dream, and I think we're all susceptible to the pressure that comes with that.
Sure.
We all deal with it in different ways. Some of us are unaffected by it and are trailblazers, and others are, really seeking to, chase that happiness, get those ideals of life, of that, happy life, if you will. So, I just think it's interesting. I think everyone has a different answer to it, but they always kind of circle back to goals. Like they'll answer it, well, I graduated in this major. I got a career in that field I was going after. I met my wife. I met my husband. I started a family. There are these major pillars that they build that idea of happiness around. So, but, it's interesting because I think a lot of people achieve many of the things they set out for, but you often find like successful people not always happy, so it begs to ask the question, like how much of that, is relevant, as far as like the goals you create. I think there's a lot there, but, was curious to get you guys' thoughts, maybe Ryan, just like of the concept of happiness and like your thoughts on how goals relate to that.
Sure. It's a fantastic topic that we're talking about today. And I think that, like you said, Kev, a lot of people equate what they have in mind for their goals to their happiness. And I think they look at it through a lens of materialistic versus non-materialistic, right? There's plenty of people who say, oh, well, I'm not successful in the standard sense of like, I didn't go to college, I don't have a high paying job, but I'm happy because I'm content with what I have. Versus the people that have that driven mindset of saying, graduated, from, let's say, an Ivy League. I went to this firm to work at, or I went to this company to work at, and I'm making X amount of money, and oh my God, I'm the happiest person in the world. But like you said, you have the uber wealthy who turn around and say, well, money doesn't equate in happiness, right? Like we're miserable as hell, even though we have all this wealth. And I think it's a internal struggle for them of saying, hey, what can I do with all this money versus, damn, I made all this money and I really don't know what to do with it, right? I think one of he's now, I would say, a more famous speaker of our time, and I think he teaches at NYU, Scott Galloway, talks about, like for himself, about having made money over the course of his life, and after a certain amount of money, he's like, I really don't need any more than that to be happy. I have my health, I have my family, I have my career. He goes, and I'm comfortable. Do I need anything more beyond my comfortability? No, I really don't. And he actually practices kind of giving that away or benefiting society in some way. And I think I would say for me personally, are my goals my own? Yeah, I'd like to think so. I think part of it is driven by what society expects, but I think another part of it was just things I personally wanted to achieve, right? And so I would say probably maybe like some of our listeners, I walk that fine line between wanting to achieve something versus what society expects of me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up 3 topics that I'm curious to hear Hendra's take on as well. Like, I think happiness often gets conflated with success in terms of wealth creation,
right,
in terms of like your career success. A lot of things go into it. And I think, you mentioned like some people achieve that and might be content and might be satisfied with what they have, and others are still chasing more. And they're, it's a paradox that, they chase these goals to make themselves happy. and then ultimately they achieve them, and that wears off. So these are really like interconnected, I think, topics that I think all are part of that happiness discussion. But yeah, Mandra, I'm curious your take on kind of how they all interplay with one another. And
yeah, sure. And top of the show we were talking about like how all of these things will interplay, right? And I do like Ryan bringing up the part about contentment, because that's naturally what we want to move into for our second topic. But but getting back to our first topic about like, are you actually chasing your goals, right? And I think in general, yes. I mean, I've set goals in general for myself, and I kind of chase them. Now, whether or not that was kind of influenced by, like, say, parents or society in general, or I would say yes, right? A lot of those things are influenced by our surroundings, our parents growing up, our society in general, what they think of what the goals are, right? The American dream, right? Following that and trying to, get your home, get your car, get the 2.5 children, marriage, and the dog, right? That's the American dream, right? Yeah. And going along with that, I kind of followed a lot of those paths, right? Too. My parents had certain goals for me too. Education's very important. Mm-hmm. And, they came from a country where education wasn't given to everybody, right? Like almost everybody couldn't achieve it. So, my parents thought that I make sure that I get my education, because it's an opportunity in the U.S. that many people don't have. And so, yeah. But you know what? As far as I can remember, I always wanted to do that too. Yeah. Right? Like, I've always wanted to get as far as I wanted to go in education wise, and do well, and try to be not necessarily the smartest guy in the room, but well educated enough to have a conversation in any room. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So you want to be able to have a conversation, be able to speak with, some credence behind what you're saying. Have some knowledge there, and also be just part of society in general. Just wanted to be more an educated citizen, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are the goals that I think I achieved. But I do think that some of them are not mine, and some of them are societal, right? Getting a house. I do remember when I was very young to try to get a house, so very hard, and then like trying to save up and doing different things to achieve that goal, and I don't regret that goal. I do. I like that goal a lot, but I also think about, is that a societal pressure that a lot of, new generation is looking at the cost of housing, and are they feeling sad about, trying to achieve that goal at the same time, where it may be just something ingrained in them from society that they need to get that, but maybe they don't need to get it like right away, and maybe they don't need to get it later, and maybe it doesn't make them happy. We don't know. Yeah. It could be a torture. It could be a torture for a lot of people that I don't know, right? Yeah. So these goal settings, marriage too. There's a big emphasis in our society to get married. Yep. From culture wise, religious wise, people in general wise, right? To get married, even through the government wise, right? You get a tax break for being married. Yeah. Right? So they incentivize you to try to get married too, right? And that's a goal. But we can see society is also changing on that too. A lot less people are getting married these days. Yeah. A lot of people are trying to find themselves first before they're joined with another, and that's where a lot of people, like my parents, got married when they were really young, and I know people who get married, they have like a goal set for like late 20s. Yeah. Late 20s, early 30s. Like their late 20s, they should find that person to date. And then by the time they're 30, 32, 31, they want to get married right at that point. Right. Yeah. So that's a lot of pressure on a lot of people too. So you're setting all these interesting goals at that point. And I think a lot of that has to do with they want to have kids too. And, you want to kind of do it at a good age, but at the same time, you want to be able to travel younger and experience things. But I mean, I guess that leads me into, because those goals have a lot of pressure, we'll move into a topic that Ryan kind of touched on there, is the sentiment. contentment. Sorry, contentment or settling, right? So what's the difference between contentment and actually just settling? What do you say there?
Yeah, I think that comes up naturally because, all of those points you mentioned of like the quote unquote ideals of home ownership, starting a family, getting so far in your career, like it's becoming more and more challenging for folks. Times are changing. So, some of them, if they do hold themselves to those goals, they feel like they may not have measured up. So they can experience a lot of dissatisfaction, or maybe they fall more they're more susceptible to fall into the societal pressure and get that pull. And they do achieve it, but they're just kind of content with it. I think my definition, like content, would just be kind of that like quiet, calm, that peace, like satisfaction of achieving your goals. It's really like a mindset, in my opinion. But I think that's everything, and that is a big determinant of happiness as well. But, there's people on the other side that might feel like they've settled for a certain lifestyle. They've settled into it, even if they've done it well and they've achieved that quote unquote goal, if it's theirs or society's.
Yeah.
If it's not theirs, I think they experience a lot of like bitterness eventually. Like, it's that lifestyle starts to wear at them. There's cracks in the foundation. I think there's that initial high that comes with achieving a goal. Sure. But dependent on how personalized it is to you, I think will determine the half-life of that happiness. So, I think it's for those 2 points, contentment and settling, I think it is a matter of perspective, just your outlook on the goal itself and how relevant it is to your own kind of personal wants.
Right.
And yeah, I think settling comes up. I think, Mahendra and I had discussed in the past of like, sometimes you see maybe athletes that don't rise all the way to the top, but they have such potential early on in their career, and they make just a few of the wrong moves that, kind of is a slap in the forehead for the audience, where they're just like, wow, he or she could take it so far. They're really like holding themselves back. But that's all a matter of perspective. Maybe they wanted to play for their own hometown, or they had familial ties where that limited their opportunities to kind of take more. So, I think you have to acknowledge both society's idea of success and happiness, and I think they're all intertwined, but it's how much that weighs on you if it becomes like kind of an anchor for you to kind of be beholden to societal pressure, or you're going to be a trailblazer and be able to live with that kind of feeling of being a bit of like a pariah, I would say. So that's my take on it.
Before Ryan goes here, I kind of wanted to jump in about that. So, yeah, you talk about athletes not maybe they settle for some things. I want to kind of give the opposite of that too, because I kind of think, like for me personally too, I feel like I've always been a driven person, and in my field there's a different level that I could go to, but I'm really happy, and I know we're using this word quite, as everything now, we're using it as a noun, an adjective, a verb. Yeah. But I'm really happy what I'm doing, right? Like I enjoy what I'm doing. But then there's another part of me that I'm fighting because I've always been driven to go higher and like try to achieve and advance. And I think those things give you those like brief highs of happiness when you achieve those things. And it's not necessarily income. It's like position, and sometimes that kind of means something to you, means something to me. But at the same time, too, I kind of fight that because I'm like, hey, you're really happy doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And you have the flexibility in this area for a lot of your life factors. So try not to fight that too much, because if you advance, you see some of those people when they advance and they're not happy at all. Like, and will you not be happy, be the same and not be happy when they are? Yeah, you could see a lot of it. You could see that a lot of their time is taken up, whereas my time is spent doing what I do, as opposed to other responsibilities that pertains to the job. I get to focus on what I do a lot. Whereas they don't get to focus so much on what they actually need to do. They have to do outside things because that's part of their job.
Yeah.
You know. And I say to myself, oh, okay, I have to, instead of the goal setting of always trying to achieve, like, maybe settle for where you're at because it makes you happy, you know? Ryan, what do you think?
I think in order to give the answer to, or at least my answer to this question, I'm going to springboard off of what you said earlier, because I believe my answer ties into that. So earlier you mentioned kind of like the American dream, getting a house, having a wife, 2.5 kids, but I could see that. But yeah, no. So going back to what I was saying, in order to, I guess, give a proper answer to this question, I would say we go back a little bit in terms of like the American dream and kind of what defined it, right? And for like, I think if you look back at our society, where we come from and our parents come from, our society stems from that same ideal too, of like, oh, you get married, you get kids, you know, you get a place of your own. They define that as their version of success, right? I would say here in the United States, that started maybe like early 1800s after like industrialism, right? Mm-hmm. Where it became that thing of like, you get that nice house with a white picket fence, you get the wife, you get the kids, the wife stays at home taking care of the kids, the husband is the breadwinner, and that started to proceed over time as the way people defined their happiness and their level of success as being able to achieve that, right? Which is what you talked about earlier. And then I think now, as we are moving into a new generation with us getting older, and then like our, you know, those of our listeners that have kids, like their generation, our nieces and nephews, that sort of thing, their generation defines it more along the lines of the freedom to do what they want, right?
Interesting.
And so, and not just what they want, where they want to do it. They don't want to pigeonhole themselves into one area. So I think in order to give that answer, I would say you'll find a lot of people who are older or past a certain age demographic, let's say, will define their level of success and goals and happiness and contentment with how much they're able to achieve in life. But I think when you look at settling in particular, why I wanted to bring all that up in order to give this answer is I would say settling is more of a trying to achieve a goal multiple times and failing, therefore getting the mindset of like, I couldn't make it, so therefore I'm going to take what I have right now. Okay. And I think we see that a lot in people that are trying to go, let's say, for some high level profession, like a doctor or a pharmacist or a nurse, or you hear about it all the time. Oh, I took my SATs, I took my MCAT, I take my, you know, whatever the test is, and I just didn't score high enough. I couldn't achieve that goal.
Right.
And because they couldn't achieve that goal, whether that's due to societal pressure afterwards, parental pressure, whatever the case may be, afterwards you see them saying, what am I going to do now? Like, maybe I have to go into another field. And that resentment of not being able to make it is then leading to their mindset of settling into whatever that new career ends up being. I would say for the next generation, and I'll give that answer before I give my personal definition. I would say for the next generation, their version would probably be travel the world, work from wherever, have experiences, and then I don't think they understand yet the concept of the word settling, right? Because to them, their ideals are so lofty. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They're still young, right? They have the time to explore the world. I would say for me, my definition of contentment versus settling, I would say it's kind of exactly what I mentioned earlier of like, when you set out with goals in mind and you're able to achieve them, that level of euphoria that Kevin mentioned, that level of happiness that you mentioned, is my version of contentment. Like, yes, you made it, you got to where you wanted to be, great. Yes, there are people that chase and go further just because that's who they are personality wise. And then I feel like those people that eventually push and push and push and push, they're the ones that end up settling because then nothing's never enough.
Right.
Right. And
yeah,
then,
I think in general, like what you're kind of saying is something I was kind of bringing up earlier, not just Pod, but to someone that is kind of like an actor who did their craft and did some really great movies, and they were able to work on the movies they wanted to, and they achieve great success doing those movies, and then they finally like win an Academy Award, like an Oscar,
Right.
or Golden Globe and Oscar, all that stuff, and then once they achieve that, their goals and their happiness led them into contentment, because now they're content in their status of where they've achieved all their goals. They don't need to do any more movies because they don't have to, but they
Right.
don't need to because they're content what they have achieved. And and then at that point, they're so content, they may move on to something like directing afterwards.
Yeah.
Because now they're going to try new goals and then try to achieve what they did with acting, right? I think we also see it in politics and in
Sports.
And but I think we also see it like in politics and business too. Like we've seen many people achieve great wealth, and it was more like a game to them to get to that wealth. It wasn't the wealth itself, but it was the game.
Yeah.
But then once they achieved it, they were just like, I need a new goal because now I'm content, but now I'm bored.
Yeah.
And I need to figure out something. So they move into politics, right? We've seen so many business people move into politics once they've achieved certain goals because they want to do that. We've seen actors do that too, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we've seen many successful people, once they've hit a certain goal, they want a new challenge, right? So contentment doesn't always have to be bad. It could be content is more of just like maybe have your goals going. I think settling has a different negative connotation to it, right? Like a lot of it does, right? Oh, you settled for this and you could have had that or whatever. And, but sometimes when people say that, they don't look at what they settled for, right? They could have settled for something that achieves them their own personal happiness. And maybe they're looking at, the other person's looking at it from their perspective and what they think is happiness. And the person they so-called settled, they're looking at it from their perspective of happiness. Like, yeah, this is great for me, and I'm going to move on and do whatever. And exactly, that could be with jobs, relationships, or anything else. It's all internal. We look at settling as, I think, from more of a objective view than a personal view.
I agree. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I was thinking of the concept of settling just even when Ryan was speaking. Like, I think a part of that, like, if you agree with that, you're subscribing to the beliefs of outsiders.
Right.
And, you might have it that might transfer to your own idea of your life and where you're at. But I think you inherently have to kind of feed into that outsider perception of yourself. But how true is that outsider's perspective? Like, will they know everything about you? Probably not. But, there's something to be said about, sometimes the held beliefs of like your social circle, it's the assumed truth. It's the social construct that forms. Like, you might be unemployed and are pursuing your own individual pursuits that, may not be, widely understood or even broadcasted to the world. But from an outsider's perspective is, Kevin doesn't work. He's unemployed. And then you kind of like can even see that carry over to like social circles where you might be shunned. You might be treated a different way.
Right.
Like you are kind of like receiving maybe looks of pity or, like assumptions that you may not be satisfied with where you are in your life. And I think everyone feels that pressure. I know I certainly did, like times when I was out of a job. I think everyone experienced this during the pandemic, that degree of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And, it just made me question just like how much of that is internal versus external. And I think most of it is external, but obviously it transfers over.
Yeah, and I would say there's also the concept of like on the flip side of that, like keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like we've all heard that phrase before,
Yeah.
where people equate having a certain level of competitive nature or comparison to their neighbors of like somehow that influences their definition of like contentment and happiness, right? Like, oh, they've got a big house, I need a big house. They got the latest car, I need the latest car. And that constant comparison, that constant need to be as good as, if not better than, who you see around you, whether that's your social circle, whether that's just your neighbors in general. I think that's where a lot of people walk that fine line of going beyond their means. And so therefore they end up in a position that makes them very unhappy or uncontent, or, you know, force them to settle because they push themselves beyond what they were capable of.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that leads us to our third topic, which is, was modern society designed to make us happy or to keep us stable and productive, right?
Oh, I got an answer for this one.
Yeah, well, I think we all do. But I think in general, our thoughts, it's really interesting because I read somewhere about modern society and how most modern societies, how they're built. You could talk about Greek times, Roman times, the time of the British ruled the world, and modern society now, is that society is kind of built around an economy, and that economy was not necessarily designed to make us happy, but just kind of make us productive and also keep us busy so that when you're kept busy, you are defining like a sense of purpose to be doing something, so you don't end up doing mischief later on, right? So, and that's how our modern economy is designed, right? So maybe not necessarily designed to make us happy, but to maybe just control us. Because a society, millions and millions of people, is really hard to govern and to make sure that we live in peace and harmony with each other. And we see that always doesn't happen, right? So, building a society where we have jobs, so we're doing something, we're defining maybe a purpose or something while we're doing it, and then creating income for that purpose, and then that income helps us buy the things in modern society to help the economy grow in a circle, right? And then all of those things keeps us supposedly happy, because we're very productive, right? A great example of this is the Matrix movies. So if you remember correctly, the machines kept everyone in pods and put them in societies to keep them productive and controlled so they could go ahead and do what they needed to do, right? Because when they felt like they put them, in an utopia, maybe not in a modern day productive society, they would rebel. They would just all of a sudden come out of it, right? So they put them in where it's a little bit of chaos, but also a little bit of management. So it's a little bit of both. So you get to do a productive society, and that people were able to get maintained in that movie. So I thought that was really interesting. What are your thoughts, Kev?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Matrix, and it's like this balancing act. I
always
think.
like bringing up the Matrix.
Yeah, and I'm not spoiling anything at this point. You should see the movie, but
It's a very old movie, people. Spoiler alert, though, if you need to hear it.
Mahendra totally just aged himself. Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
But I think even if you haven't seen it, you're familiar with many references. It's persevered throughout many generations, and rightfully so. And I think it came to my mind when I was asking, why does society push these ideals on you and these goals? Like, how did we come together to think like this is the ideal way? And I think we talked about earlier, like sometimes the government can even incentivize certain lifestyles. Like we talked about marriage and children, and then there's a social fabric that goes along with it. But, if you think about kind of that Matrix analogy, like if they're just in a utopia and they don't have to kind of focus on, achieving goals or like finding their place in society, kind of a bit of organized chaos, they kind of rebel. They kind of get a little stir crazy. I think of Bill Burr's bit, just, he was saying, like, if he was in heaven on the 30th day, he's wondering, does it ever rain in here? There's like, is it perfect all the time? Like, I think it wears at us where we need some kind of variety and challenge and feel like we're actually like contributing to this ecosystem, this society. So it's a great analogy. And I think I question, like, if this lifestyle, may the happiness we derive out of like the material things, the social ideals of marriage and children, like they may have a byproduct of happiness, but do they kind of conform to a society that is productive and is friendly towards one another, that is easier to be governed? It begs the question. I mean, there's certainly many different financial, incentives and social incentives, but, I think, it's very interesting. Like, I think sometimes we kind of create a cycle for ourselves of like wanting to chase after these material things, these goals, and we find ourselves, dissatisfied when we don't kind of meet that mark. But were we that dissatisfied before kind of setting out for those goals and that journey? It's hard to know, because
Right.
again, we talked about that outsider perspective. I think we fight that to not look like we are settling or we are unproductive. We are kind of like just loafing around.
What do you say, Rye?
So earlier when you brought up this topic, I said I had an answer for you, but I'll try to frame it in a broader context that I think there is a answer to it. I don't think necessarily a lot of people agree to this answer, but I would say probably there is an actual answer, and the answer is that
You heard it here, folks. We heard it here first. Ryan has the answer.
Well, I don't know about the answer, but I would say an answer, probably.
Sorry to disappoint you, folks.
They'll live. They're all right. I would say, we're geared more toward being stable and productive, and a lot of that goes back to earlier what I kind of alluded to of like the American dream, right? So, for historical context, right, the work week, everybody hates the idea of working 5 days a week. Some people wish the weekends were a lot longer. That started due to Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller, right? So Henry Ford created the production line. People were working 7 days a week before then. But he said, okay, people are miserable working 7 days a week. I got to give them days off. What can I give them? Oh, let's give them 2 days off and make them work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And that's how that concept started. And then the idea shifted from, now keep in mind who I mentioned here, right? People of amass wealth and influence at the time. They turned around and said, okay, well, we got people working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. They're not questioning the work week. They get days off. We can question them. We can push them toward a certain, like, let's get them to go to school. Let's get them to focus on an education. Then they become an employee. They don't question what it is they learn, right? And so for both our culture and then here in the US, there's a lot of people that just cannot go past a certain level of education, right? So they are taught to question a bit more of what's going on around them. And I think, like you said earlier, Mahendra, how do you control a society of millions of people? Well, you give them a common attribute, right? You give them a job to make sure they're productive. You give them ideals to circle around. You give them common goals to achieve. Yeah. And they're going to be so busy trying to do that and compete with each other that they're not going to question what else is around them, right? Yeah. I would say, like Kevin said earlier, about like having like this concept of like achieving your goal and trying to get to that goal, and then saying whether or not you're happy that you achieved that goal. I would say, there's a concept of like fulfillment versus, like we said, contentment earlier, versus settling. And then there's the idea of like the complete opposite of that, like, okay, what happens when I do fail, right? Like, do I build myself back up? How do I build myself back up, right? What becomes my new goal? What becomes my new level of achievement after that? And therefore, then at the end of the day, chasing happiness, what is my new level of happiness, right? And so I think you're right. I think
Diamond
that
level. That's the new goal. Diamond level. That's oh no.
No.
There's no levels. Oh, okay. Never mind. Sorry, I thought we were defining levels, so I was just like gold level, diamond level,
I mean, I'm pretty sure.
status.
I'm pretty.
delta status. There we go.
I'm pretty sure Bruno said it best. 24 carats.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you go. Oh. Well, I think those are great points, and I think it does lead us into the next topic too. So we're flowing pretty well today, guys. It's I guess commercialism, consumerism, right? Has consumerism given us more freedom, or just more comfortable prisons? Interesting. Ryan, I'll start with you because it sounds like you want to get into this right now.
I mean, interesting. Very, very interesting. I guess it depends on your personal definition of the word prison, right? Earlier in the pod, we talked about kind of like the wealthy talking about how like they don't. There's some wealthy people that say, I've achieved what I want to achieve. I don't know what to do with the rest of my money. They decide to give it away, right? And I would say that there are those that look around and say, I can do better with what I have, and therefore I shall give it away, versus actually like turning around and saying, okay, you know what? I have so much money, but I'm in my prison because there's nothing for me to do with it, right? And on the flip side of that, like the average person on a day-to-day, consumerism is great. It gives us everything that we're used to, right? Like you said, we work, we achieve whatever we can get. Even those that don't make a high income, they're still happy with what they have because they work to achieve it. There's that feeling of self-accomplishment, right? And I think that everyone wants to achieve a level of comfortability. And what does that level of comfortability look like? It depends on who you are, right? It depends on the neighborhood you grew up in, what job you have. It depends on, what are your influences, right? Do you have
Could
a
depend
role
on
model?
American dream, right?
Well, I mean, you can depend on the American dream, whether you're in America, whether you're not in America, whether or not you're considering to move to America to achieve that level of American dream, because you can't achieve it where you grew up or where, you're living currently, right? I think it's a very interesting question that you brought up here, and I think that they somewhat tie into it, right? So I think like if we work hard, the saying is if you work hard, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve, right? That's not necessarily realistic given the cost of things every day, right? And I think that there's a lot of people struggling with 2 jobs, 3 jobs to afford a quality of life that maybe to them it's considered a prison because they can't break past that glass ceiling of achieving more because they're already at their limit, right? Versus like people who are, who are in a situation where, they don't necessarily have to work 2 to 3 jobs. They work that one job, they make a decent salary, they have a nice size house, they have a car that may not be the fanciest car, but they have a car. They're able to move places, right? They're able to achieve their level of consumerism and success. So therefore they wouldn't see themselves as living in a prison, right? So I think there's levels to speak, and then there's kind of like your own personal definition of what your level would be.
Oh, Kev?
Yeah, my take on the relationship there between, I guess, consumerism and freedom. Like, we're chasing freedom, and I think freedom is baked into the American society, and I think it is a lot of material things. We talked about family and home ownership, but, Ryan mentioned the fancy sports car. I think there are certain held ideals of this lifestyle, of this, living this American dream that inherently grants you freedom, and it's all baked into consumerism. And to me, I think the prison, quote unquote, that people put themselves in is largely of a financial tether or impact.
Sure.
Because I think of people that start out trying to pursue those material goals and ideals of life. They start out at zero. Let's say in this hypothetical, you're looking to obtain a job. You get a job, great. Now you have to find a way to commute to that job. You have to buy a car. You get into debt, taking a car loan, and now you're working. You can get to work, but you're working to pay that car loan.
Right.
And then now you have to make more money because there's more things you want to achieve. You want to purchase a home. So, you're able to kind of work harder and save up and put a down payment for a mortgage. Now you have to make your car payment. You have to make your home mortgage, to put the roof over your head.
Property taxes.
Taxation is into it. Whatever it is, I think if it's a car, if it's a home you're seeking, it's hard to not talk about the finances of that.
Right.
And I think that's where the prisons come in. I think, we chase like certain conveniences, quote unquote, but they actually can make our lives much more difficult. And we are just working to maintain that life. I saw, a funny thing on Instagram just saying like some people are just working to afford gas to get to work. That's what they're doing. Or their car payment. You can insert whatever the expense is. But if you think about it, we as a society and this individual that I'm speaking of hypothetically has created that financial burden for himself.
Right.
Chasing these ideals that may not necessarily all be his. He might have, again, bought into a little bit of outside perspective, societal perspective of like what an ideal life should look like. Like, what do I need to do to not seem like a loser? Like, to seem like I'm successful.
Right.
And convey that to my friends. I need a luxury car. I need
the biggest
a big
house.
house.
Yeah.
I need a beautiful family. But then they kind of mire themselves with all the stress and financial like impact that has to them. And they're working so much more harder, like chasing their tail, trying to like just maintain what they have. When, where they started out, you think of where they started out, there wasn't that much stress associated with it. The only thing you had was wanting more.
Yeah.
And I think, it's so interesting because like it plays back from the very beginning when we're talking about the goals you organize your life around. I think we all do that. I think we all...
Yeah, I agree.
We all share that. It's a shared human experience. And we decide how much we let in of the outsider's perspective and what we gravitate towards. And then trying to find our own piece of happiness in ourselves, finding things that we do. And, I think I talked about this with Mahendra before. Like, I think of like people that go through changes in their lives where they originally are very happy. And again, we talked about achieving goals and success. Like, people get all of that. And obviously not everyone who achieves success is happy. We've seen many successful people that are not.
Yeah.
But, I think of like people that, say they have the beautiful family or they have the awesome career. In those two particular, common things I find are like with families, as parents, then suddenly they become empty nesters.
Yeah.
And then they have like this kind of identity crisis of like, I've built my whole life around my kids. I'm a parent and now I'm kind of at a loss. Or, career as well. Like, I retire. You see so many people that struggle with retirement, because they built their whole identity around it. It goes into an identity crisis as well. So, I think it's really interesting because like the purpose changes there. As far as how they built their life around, like my purpose was to, be this mogul in finance or be a successful actor or be this amazing dad or mother, parents, to my kids. And now they lose that. And then I think that's where the dissatisfaction comes in, is that they lose that purpose.
Right.
So I think all these things we're talking about come into this cycle for me, and I'll present it and just hear your thoughts on it. But like, to me, I've always thought happiness is not like a destination. It's a side effect or a byproduct. It's a temporary high that comes with achieving goals that are personal to you, that bring you fulfillment. So, it typically will start like with your purpose that we mentioned. We build our lives around achieving those purposes, those milestones, build goals around it to achieve that. And once we do, we're fulfilled. We have that temporary happiness. And then that lasts, that the happiness does last, I think, especially when you like believe these are your goals and it's your purpose. But to me, it kind of fades a bit. I think it fades until you find a new purpose. And I think the people that have kind of mastered this happiness game are very adept at finding new purpose. So, I think of Mahendra's example of the actor, that achieved success. That's his goal. His purpose is to be the successful actor in his field and be lauded with awards, and he gets that, and he's super happy. But then 6 months go by, and then it starts to fade a little bit. He'll do more movies. He might get the same accomplishment, but it lessens and lessens over time. And,
the happiness fades.
Yeah. So then he has to shift, or he doesn't have to, but let's say he decides to shift to being a director. Now he has a newfound purpose.
Right.
And he incorporates a lot of learning points of being an actor to being a director. He's seen another side of it. And I think we all do that in a way. But to me, it's a cycle. And in order to kind of maintain that happiness, you have to keep working towards something. And that, to me, I would call a purpose. That's kind of the success. That's the secret, I would say, to happiness, is trying to find that purpose. And there's a lot that goes into that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it takes people a good part of their lives to find out what they love and what they're here on this earth for, all of those bigger questions. Sometimes they get lucky and it is their career, it is the family, but some of us not. I mean, you see a lot of people that have midlife crises that, from an outsider's perspective, they can be doing great. So
yeah, I think about a lot of people who I've known over the years, and they achieved the job maybe they wanted, and they're starting out and they're having a comfortable life. And as their life improves with income and wealth, they start to expand it. Luxury cars, bigger houses, bigger things. Hey, there's just, I need all the space I can need, and maybe some of this stuff is myself included, with, hey, I need this or I need that. And then when you start doing that, you start setting the bar higher and higher of what you need to maintain, right? Like you were mentioning before.
Yeah, lifestyle group. Pretty much.
Lifestyle, right? I could think about myself right here. I could think about my lifestyle when I was in college, and I can think about my lifestyle right now. And that is
those ramen noodle days.
Well, no, didn't quite do the ramen noodles. Did other things like dollar menu at McDonald's, stuff like that. But but it's vastly different, right? And you would say to myself, if I had to look back to myself, was I unhappy back then? No, not really. I was kind of just going through that stage of life at that point, and now I'm at a different stage. And I think I'm happy now, and I think I was happy then. So I don't think I don't think I'm happy now. I know I am happy now. But at the same time, I was also happy back then. But, I think that does create somewhat of a prison for yourself, right? Because if you have to maintain that life. A lot of people, we watch another show. I know, Kev, we introduced Ryan to it, called Friends and Neighbors. And we talk about, and then that show, there's a lot of people in that show that are trying to maintain their life because that defines who they are and what they are. And they certainly could go back to a different life, but they can't, because it almost seems impossible, because that's what they're growing accustomed to. Right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting. But I think this was a great discussion on chasing happiness. But before we go, do you guys have any final thoughts, Ryan?
No, I would say that everyone defines their happiness the way they choose to, and as long as they're not going above their means, I think that anyone can do anything they put their mind to, and I think they could keep working hard and achieving what they want to achieve.
Yeah, final thoughts, Kev?
Yeah, I would say I think maybe that the secret is not chasing happiness. It's more so finding your purpose and how that evolves over time. And the happiness will come.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for listening to the CastNet podcast. We're still looking for advertisers. So if you want, please reach out at castnetpod@gmail.com. Or if you have comments, please send us an email. Please click like and subscribe to our channel. And leave us a nice little review if you can. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it'll go over really greatly if you send us a review and let us know how we're doing. But for now, we'll see you until next time. Thank you.
Peace.
Adios.